So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michelle Assad, and I am also a practitioner in residence. I'm with the Immigrant Justice Clinic, and I'm also a proud 2013 alumni of WCL and of the Immigrant Justice Clinic. So I was able to return to the clinic last year in a different position, initially as a supervising attorney for defending the AU Dream Initiative. It's an initiative that's still ongoing, but I was happy to also transition into the practitioner in residence this past summer. Practitioner in residence.
Sorry about that, I was on mute. Thank you so much, Professor Assad. Professor Kandhar?
Oh, I said not it. My name is Parag Kandhar, and I teach in the Entrepreneurship Law Clinic, which it's the first year of the ELC. I'm a proud grad from 2010, and I was in the Community Economic Development Law Clinic as a student, and really happy to be here.
Wonderful. And Professor Millward?
Hi, I am a practitioner in the Civil Advocacy Clinic. I'm in my second year here, and I am also a proud 2010 WCL grad. And I happen to also be a president of EJF, and so this feels like a very familiar space for me.
Love it. So I'm just going to start off with a more broad question, and feel free to just round robin it. I don't necessarily need to call on you, but I think we would all love to know what your sort of career path has been since law school that has led to you now teaching in the WCL clinic, sort of where your career has taken you since graduating.
Sure, I can get started with that. And so when I was a WCL student, I was interested in representing individuals, doing direct client services work, but I wasn't sure exactly how I was going to do that. I did a full year public defense clinic, but I also interned at Civil Legal Services, and so I was a little bit split. Graduating in the height of the recession, the job market was a little bit dicey. I took a little bit of time off thinking about my options, exploring, ended up doing some work that wasn't law related while applying for a number of different positions, landing on Civil Legal Services. And I took a chance, applied to a position in Montana where I had never been before as a Equal Justice Works AmeriCorps Law Fellow. And so it was a 2-year term position funded by AmeriCorps. I was doing both medical legal partnership work at a little tiny medical legal partnership at a small community health services location, as well as public benefits work. I was able to leverage that AmeriCorps fellowship into a full-time staff attorney position. So I was living the dream as a civil legal services attorney in Montana. And in that position, I mostly did public benefits work, did a little bit of housing law, and I was pulled into work on redeveloping our seasonal farm worker program, strategizing about how we could kind of reinvigorate it and reach out to workers. I ended my time at Montana as kind of an interim managing attorney after some turnover in the office, and then moved to DC with my husband, who had a job with the government. Took another little chunk of time off thinking about, which is a privilege, and I just want to drop a pin and recognize that. Thinking about what I want to do, what I liked about civil legal services, where I want to go kind of with my career, and an opportunity at Georgetown's Health Justice Alliance, which is a clinic, it's a medical legal partnership clinic at Georgetown Law, opened up. So I spent 2 years as a clinical fellow at Georgetown, and then was happy to come back to WCL as a practitioner.
I guess I could go next. So I came into law school not quite knowing what I wanted to do, or probably like most of you thinking about international law and like what that even meant. but I ended up on the immigration track. And that was thanks to one of my first internships that first year, after the first year of law school, with Kids in Need of Defense, KIND. And that internship turned from a summer internship into a fall internship. And then fast forwarding a little bit, I graduated and I ended up getting with the WCL's JD Distinguished Fellowship to work again at KIND upon graduation. So I was really thankful for that bridge that WCL provided and allowed me to continue working in immigration after graduation. And then soon after that, I found a permanent job with Brooklyn Defender Services. And that was kind of, it was kind of funny how everything kind of fell into place, because before law school, I was a paralegal at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. And I had kind of a bit of this criminal background interest. But then coming to WCL and falling more into the immigration world, I came upon a criminal immigration case in my third year at the clinic. And, you know, I very clearly remember sitting down with my professor, Jayesh Rathod, who is actually now my boss, right, coworker, asking me, hey, so what do you think? Do you think you want to do Crim M? And I'm like, I don't know if that's for me. And then lo and behold, just 3 years later, I was still working in that very new field of immigration called Crim M. And here I was advising criminal defense attorneys on, and their clients, of the consequences of criminal convictions on your immigration status. So it's really funny how that path came about. Like I said, it led me to Brooklyn Defender Services for a few years. And then I moved, I came back to the area and worked with the Maryland Public Defender, doing the same thing, but I was specifically assigned to Prince George's County, Maryland. And I was only one of 2 immigration attorneys in all of the Maryland Public Defender system who was providing advice to our non-citizen clients. And then I guess at that point, you know, I think I was missing doing the direct client services at OPD. I was mostly just doing the advising, and I was kind of like, I considered myself to be more of a consultant, kind of working in the shadows, right, of my criminal defense attorney peers. And I really wanted to get back into the direct services. But I also felt very drawn to returning to WCL and imparting, you know, so much of the knowledge that I've already gained and working again with the clinic. So that's where I am now.
I can go next. So I didn't mention in my introduction, I'm the only non-AUW, or only person who did not graduate from AUWCL. I graduated from Tulane in 2015. And I would say I took a little bit of a meandering path to get here. So I entered, this goes a little bit further back, but I entered into law school thinking that I would be an environmental attorney and would work for a federal agency. And my first summer, I clerked at the environment, or I was a law clerk at the Environmental Protection Agency, and I didn't like the pace of the day-to-day work. And so my second summer, I clerked for the Northern Virginia Capitol Defender's Office, and I had considered criminal law for a little bit, and then decided that that wasn't precisely where I wanted to go. And so after law school, I was a clerk for a domestic relations magistrate in Baltimore City for 1 year. And then I worked for, just prior to this, for 4 years, worked for Children's Law Center, which is a legal services provider in Washington, D.C. And I worked in specifically with our medical legal partnership team, which Jess mentioned that she worked for as well, or worked with as well, with a medical legal partnership. And it is a partnership between medical providers and legal providers, where medical providers will refer patients to a legal services organization or lawyers in the same way that they might refer a patient to a social worker or a specialist in a certain area of medicine. And I was there for 4 years and represented clients in a variety of different areas, including education, housing, healthcare, and then some other smaller.
Even next episode, you say you can't come after me, and I'm not gonna come after you.
Oh, sorry.
Can I just ask that all attendees just mute their microphone, please? Thank you so much.
And so I represented clients in a number of areas, and I actually came to that position. I wrote a paper about medical legal partnerships in law school and interviewed as part of writing the paper, the person who ultimately hired me. And so when the position came open after law school, I emailed and said, I don't know if you remember me, but I really want to work for you. And it worked out.
It's so great to hear everyone's stories a little bit. For me, I'll go a little further back. My great-grandfather was an attorney in India, and I heard a little bit about him, but I didn't even know, what he practiced. But I did grow up knowing that my mom always wanted to be an attorney, and because she was a woman and because her family didn't have a lot of money, she wasn't actually able to do that. And it was a kind of a thing that she always wanted. So we grew up with just that knowledge. I had no interest in being an attorney. I went to undergrad in upstate New York, moved down to New York City right after that, and worked in New York City in community arts space that I managed. I worked for other community arts organizations, and then took a job doing sort of direct advocacy and public policy work, focusing on the Asian American sort of migrant communities in New York City. I did census advocacy, data advocacy, electoral stuff, and then 9/11 happened. So 9/11 really changed my life. A lot of my work really focused, I was an intermediate nonprofit that was supporting social service organizations and organizing groups that worked with different populations and different geographies throughout New York. And suddenly, instead of being this intermediate that was providing support and technical assistance to nonprofits, but not working directly with the people, there was all this need. So we opened up a satellite office, and I hired case coordinators and some social workers, and we just started to work with people in need, people who lost family members, people who had mental health crises after September 11th, people in Chinatown, New York Chinatown lost quite a bit of economic activity, and it was like a military zone, basically. As well as people whose families had been swept away by immigration, and sort of, you can't go into all of the things that were happening at that time, but it's this incredible sort of experience of multiple years of both understanding the needs for community members to access, the services that, my colleagues have talked about, and then also feeling frustrated as a middle manager. So at a certain point I said, I want to do something, and I thought it would be, law school or social work school, but I'd been working with social workers enough to know that I didn't feel like I had those skills. My partner at the time was a lawyer, and she said, please do not make me go through law school again. And she supported me. So talking about privilege and naming those privileges, I applied to a few schools, and I was only looking for places that would really support public interest work. And I had the privilege of getting a scholarship at WCL. So I came down on a public interest scholarship to WCL. I actually graduated in 2008, so I got that wrong. And through it, I really didn't know. In the beginning, I didn't know what I was going to do. And I was connected with Professor Susan Bennett in the Sun Law Clinic, who, as a 1L, heard me just talking about, I'm interested in this and I'm interested in that. And she didn't overwhelm me. She gave me a few options and a few things to think about. I became her Dean's Fellow, and then I became her student. And I'm still her student. The debt that I owe to her to help me in this journey of really understanding what it means to be a community attorney, a community lawyer, how to be oriented to community in a meaningful way. That's why I still teach, honestly. It's because I had a teacher who really helped me to see what's possible. And so I graduated and got a job with the Asian Pacific American Legal Resource Center here in the DC metro area as a tenants attorney, and I also was helping folks to organize tenant associations and did a lot of language access work. So immigrant justice, immigrant rights work feels very close to the heart. Before that, actually, I interned with Casa de Maryland with Professor Jessica Millward and a number of other WCL alum, actually, and met my law partner, Dorcas Gilmore, who has also taught at WCL. So now I'm skipping ahead. So I've taught for 8 years. This is my 8th year teaching. And I also have a small private law firm called Parag Kandhar, in which we really focus on transformative transactional work. We work with grassroots and community enterprise as well as nonprofits, and we represent folks who are trying to, build a new society, really, and also, look at different ways in which we can use our skills to help people build anti-capitalist projects. And that's all big words. Like also just have some sense of ownership over their own lives, their own time, and having some sense of self-determination. So I'm really happy to kind of be here with everyone. Also, can't wait to hear questions and engage. And what does public interest mean? Thank you.
Thank you all so much. I mean, I personally love hearing about the very, very different paths that have led you all sort of back to WCL and sort of encompass all of this broad range of things that can mean public interest. And sort of feeding into that, one question we often talk about as law students is especially public interest law students, is what sort of skills do you need to be an effective public interest lawyer? And in keeping with that, how do you build those skills during law school? So for all of you, what sort of activities, whether it be a certain class or a certain internship or writing, what was it that you did during law school that really gave you the skills to be an effective public interest lawyer?
I'll jump in again, and I think one of the most important skills to be an effective public interest lawyer is actually listening and being able to engage in really active listening and thinking about what questions to ask your clients and community members so that you can hear them and then engage with them and work towards being client-centered and understanding their needs and then following them and like the path to accessing justice in whatever mechanisms they want. And so in law school, for me, that meant engaging in a variety of internships with different communities, sitting with people, observing other attorneys in their practice, and being that fly in the wall and seeing what I liked about other attorneys and how they ask questions, seeing what their clients responded to, and also seeing maybe what didn't feel like me or what didn't maybe didn't seem as effective. And so throughout WCL, one of the things that you can do is engage in internships over the summer. And also I do think, plug for the clinical program, but taking clinic will really help you advance those goals, because instead of, being the fly in the wall, being the intern, maybe drafting some questions, maybe getting the opportunity to ask some questions as a student attorney in the clinic, you are an attorney and you get to engage in both the process of drafting questions and the process of actually engaging with your client and working on active listening. I'm excited to hear what everybody else says.
I can go next. So I think one of the skills that I really learned in law school was building network and maintaining those relationships. And of course, you are doing that through, as Jessica just said, having internships and having a variety of internships too. I remember, connecting back with my former employers before law school, reaching out to them about opportunities and the possibilities. Also, doing an internship with the immigration court was also a great way of building network. It was there that my supervisor at the time also ended up teaching a class at WCL. So, you know, it just, the network continues, and you're able to follow it more closely. And, you know, years later, I was able to reach out to her. She was able to reach out to me about certain issues that we could put our heads together for. But also, perhaps another plug for Clinic is honestly part of my network today still remains to be my Clinic colleagues. I reach out to them at least once a month to talk about cases, to vent, right? To share not only professional, but also personal stories. And again, I think just building network is really important to that. And starting now is extremely important for, especially for public interest. I guess what I want to just make another point of is that it's those networks that lead to kind of like cross-discipline, partnerships. And so, you know, already Caroline and Jessica have talked about medical legal partnerships. That's a huge partnership. The Immigrant Justice Clinic right now is also engaged in a partnership like that with La Clínica del Pueblo here in DC, where we're essentially providing asylum advice and consultations to members of the community. But also for me personally, right, I have my intersection of criminal and immigration law. And so that's yet another network that's really important to have and to build on. So that's, you know, essentially that's what it does. It helps you stay in the loop in your own practice, but it also helps expand your practice.
Thanks so much, Professor Assad. And Professor Wick and Professor Kandhar, I don't know if you want to continue answering this question, but if you do, we also had a student question that's sort of expanding on not just what opportunities helped you build skills, but also what opportunities helped you helped shape your career and understand the law itself. So maybe in your answers, you could talk not only about what was skill building, but also what helped shaped your career.
Excuse me, sure, I'm happy to address both. I support both Michelle and Jess in encouraging internships and encouraging a variety of internships. And if your schedule doesn't allow internships, I'd also encourage volunteer opportunities in different areas. So in law school, for instance, I volunteered to represent, well, they weren't clients at the time, but older prisoners who were seeking parole. And it was something I could do not as a student attorney, but just as a volunteer representative. So there are a number of different volunteer opportunities like that may help you just get exposure to a different area of law. I also think skills-based classes are helpful. So trial advocacy, mediation, negotiation. I think you might have picked up on the fact that oftentimes with public interest, you're asked to be a lawyer from your first day on the job, and there often isn't as much training as one might like or hope for. And so along those lines, I also really do put in a plug for the clinic. I think it's an amazing opportunity for students to work closely with attorneys and to learn from other student attorneys and to have actual clients. I think it's great. And I also wholeheartedly agree with building your networks. The Disability Rights Law Clinic is about to take some cases for compassionate release for clients who are seeking release from prison due to the threat of COVID-19. And I was watching a presentation and somebody that I clerked with at the Northern Virginia Capital Defender's Office was giving the presentation. I was like, hey, to the screen, but it was great. And so I think that is, you know, just thinking about those, you know, getting a variety of experiences. You just don't know when prior experiences will inform your current work. And then in terms of my understanding of the law and how I came to an understanding of the law, I think really what Jess was talking about in terms of observing the people that you are interning with, asking questions, like taking advantage. If somebody says, like, let's go get coffee or can we go to lunch, those can really help those experiences and talking to other attorneys about how they see their role as an attorney and observing them can be really helpful. Oh, and the Equal Justice Works conference, I'm sure everybody has heard of it or is going, but or plans to go in the future, but I do really recommend it.
Thank you. I think there's so much that my colleagues have said. So I would only add a few things from my own experience, but otherwise I think there's such great information and guidance and wisdom there. For me, I think I've come across, I mean, especially WCL, a lot of people who just really care passionately about issues, who really care passionately about social change. Sorry, there's lunchtime happening. And also people who actually are really drawn to organizing, right? Like I want to be an organizer, have a lot of friends who are organizers, and I think like recognizing if you are training as an attorney and you would actually like to function as an attorney, that just thinking about what that role is really important, and thinking about what my role is within social change, social movement work, to me feels like really important. And talking, finding mentors. So networks are so vital, and finding people who you can co-mentor with, who can be your mentor. What Professor Wick mentioned about the clinical program, I mentioned my clinical professor as being, a mentor still in many ways. That is, finding professors. There are also people in the field, who are willing. And I would, really plug the WCL Alumni Network. People really do support one another. I would, the last thing I would just say, because there's plenty of things to say on this, is, I think often the way that law is taught, or even the practice of law is taught, is that it's an adversarial process. And for me, really, especially because I'm really moving into restorative, sort of thinking about restorative and transformative justice, but just really simply to reject that when it comes to public interest colleagues, and to reject that when it comes to the scarcity mindset that there's one job and I can't tell anybody else about it. I don't believe in it. Yes, there's maybe a few jobs. And also for me, supporting people and letting people know, and then, taking in that information has deepened my relationships with people and has made opportunities more possible. So reject, I can see how big law does things and how people are, taught to be gunners about, in everything. And I just reject it. There's plenty of space and there's a crap ton of work to do, if you care. And as you all know, there's so much to do. So I just say support one another. It seems, seems kind of hokey, but that's part of the network piece is, what can I give? And then also what can I receive when I need? Thank you.
Thank you all so much. We've had another student question that's asking sort of in the same vein of skills building and understanding the law. Several attorneys, including from legal nonprofits, have suggested that it's easier to transition from a firm to a nonprofit rather than vice versa. So start off at a firm, but is that easier said than done?
I could start with this one. So when I was at the APLRC, we worked with our executive director to have the staff attorneys and actually the organizers, everybody on staff, actually take over hiring. And so we had a number of openings, and we did have people who were transitioning. It was that period, especially that period with the economic downturn, that was so significant. For me, I mean, I haven't moved that way. I moved from nonprofits into private practice, and it was really hard. It was hard to really, like, if people were just trying to find a job, that's one thing, right? I think it's really clear as an interviewer. It was very clear when people were just looking for jobs. So if you really believe in some level of public interest lawyering, developing those skills in the private sector or in the public sector, I think that point that Professor Wick again, raised about you just get dropped right in sometimes and you're just expected to practice. Having space within firms and having space within the public sector, within government to be trained can be, great. But for me, the only thing is just be really clear about why you're there. What skills are you developing, and then how do you translate that into bringing it into other practice? Because for me, it was really transparent when that was what people were doing. I went in so I could really learn this aspect of the law versus I don't like it anymore. The hours are too hard. Okay, thank you.
Yes, and I absolutely agree with what Parag just said. I was in a position where I was doing a fair amount of hiring in Montana on kind of hiring and resume review panels. And it was very apparent when individuals were coming from the private sector and were in it because they thought that legal aid would be, possibly easier work or fewer hours, or they needed a job. And what we would look for was a clear track record of pro bono work, possibly being on the board of a nonprofit or charitable organization. We would look back to law school, see what courses individuals took. Were they engaged in courses that were developing trial ad skills, or courses that were looking at the intersection of race and the law, or poverty law, right? We would look to see what is an individual's interest, what internships they take, and see how that fit with our mission and how that story was told in their application. And so, again, it's a matter of messaging and explaining your interest. And, it's certainly not everybody is able to just go straight into public interest work. People have loans to pay off. People often need to make firm money, and that is absolutely rational and reasonable. But there can be a bias, and I think it's an unfortunate bias in the public interest hiring space for public interest individuals who are like straight through like public interest.
Just one addition, I think if you do choose the firm route for one reason or another, you can also look into pro bono opportunities in your firm. I know like my prior organization partnered a lot with pro bono firms, and I echo everything that Jess said about making sure that your reasons for wanting to work in the nonprofit or in legal services are clear in your application materials.
Great, thank you so much. Next question I was hoping some or all of you could answer is, law school places a great emphasis on research and writing skills, and how important has the sort of litigation focus that law school often is been for your public interest career in terms of honing all of these skills?
I can start with that question. I'm going to say for me, at least in the immigration practice, it's really been a balance of achieving both mastering research and writing, but also with litigation. And so in the immigration practice, you might find yourself in immigration court where you do face with an adversary and really, and not just that, your client might also be detained. So there, you are definitely going to need litigation skills in that field because you'll be negotiating not just with the immigration attorney from the Department of Homeland Security, but you'll also be dealing with the deportation officer that kind of also has some power and can hold the key to your client's release after the fact. So again, that takes litigation skills, negotiation skills, communication skills. But to back all that up, you better be ready with that memorandum or the research and the statutes to even support your arguments for your client's release or for your client's eligibility for a defense to deportation. So, I mean, I think it depends on what practice you go into, but in my practice, it's definitely been a balance of both. And one thing I want to go back just briefly to the question that Carissa put in the chat box, which was any specific opportunity you wish you took prior to or during law school. And I think one thing that I wish I had taken during law school was more courses in writing and research. I think I probably focused too much on courses that did more of exam taking. And so I think that would have been really helpful for me after graduating to have that more of that practice under my belt. But perhaps, if not through courses, then maybe it's a matter of doing more internships or something more related to like a clerkship where you can get that practice. Thanks.
And I just wanted to take note that Professor Kandhar has added some additional thoughts in the chat. We have another student in question about the economic investment in law school, especially when you're planning on a career in public interest. The student asks, what advice can you give to students planning to enter a career in public interest law, both in beginning and applying for law school and starting a professional career, given that the economic investment for a career in public interest is quite steep?
And so I, for law school myself, fully through student loans. And when I went to law school, I honestly didn't really realize what that would mean for me about exiting law school. I didn't really think about it, to be honest. However, I was lucky because public service loan forgiveness, which granted is a little bit dicey right now, but public service loan forgiveness came into being just before I graduated from law school. And so that's a space I've been leaning into fairly hard. And there's I'm drawn to public service, but I will be staying in public service until, right, my loan is forgiven. So taking it, I think in law school, what you can do is work with the Office of Financial Aid and really watch those webinars, learn about public service loan forgiveness, think about how all of your time is spent and also the impact of taking gaps on that public service loan forgiveness, which is one thing that I have. So what happens with public service loan forgiveness is for each month you pay your loan and you're on a loan repayment plan. Each month you pay and you're working at a public service job and you're able to certify it. Theoretically, all those months accrue, and after 10 years worth of months, your loans are forgiven as long as you can prove it up. And so for me, I've made choices, as I noted, to take gaps, which means then that I'll be in public interest. I need to stay in public interest for longer, but there is, law school is very expensive. But for me, the public interest track, it feeds me, it keeps me happy. And so for me, the cost benefit is worth it.
I'll answer quickly here. Well, two things. In terms of litigation, litigation is not a part of my practice. So as outside general counsel to a range of different kinds of values-driven, sort of mission-oriented companies, as well as nonprofits, we have to be aware of litigation and just coordinate and understand. And I like to say that the kind of practice that we do is helping people to build things. So I feel I feel really grateful for that that context. In terms of the money, I think it's real. I came in with a public interest scholarship, which means that I didn't have student loans, with a commitment to doing public interest work, and I continue to have that commitment. And also part of that commitment for me was recognizing the tremendous privilege to have that. And so at WCL specifically, I was part of a collective of students who really pushed the administration to put more money into the public interest loan repayment program, PILRAP. You know, the dean didn't like us, and the student senate didn't like us until we took it over, and really tried to make it really clear that this, you know, it's nice to pay for summers, right? And also for really ensuring that people can actually stay in this practice or in whatever this practice is. We need people in legal aid. We need people as public defenders, and they're not going to get paid, you know, the same amount that people are getting paid in private practice or even the government. So on the advocacy side, really pushing the school to do better is really key. Always. Students and alum have far more say than the administrators who care so much, and even faculty. And also, you know, just to be smart about the numbers, you know, to not say, well, I'll deal with it later, and to really sit, I think, you know, both to, you know, think, as Professor Millward said, about, you know, talking with the finance office, and also like being very, like really thinking about budgeting. Like, yes, lawyers don't like numbers, sure. And also like, this is about your future, and to not feel bound that, you know, because I have these loans, therefore I can't do what I want to do until 10 years, 15 years, 20 years down. How can I do what I want to do? You know, the loans are real, and, you know, all that debt is real, and there are ways, and there are people who figured out ways. My law partner likes to say, you know, I came out with student loans, and I just decided what are the things that are most important for me, you know, and she likes to say, I like to eat. And so she made sure that, you know, she had that budget. And, you know, she said, I don't need like, you know, all of the things. I don't need, you know, a new car every 3 years or whatever it is. You know, and just thinking about that when it comes to what market you live in and all the things, you know. So I'm really happy to talk to folks more about this, because it is a challenge, and it really shouldn't stop folks from trying to figure out, you know, how to do the good work that they want to do.
Thanks so much. Without cutting off this conversation, but with hopes to add to it, I just wanted to note that Angie McCarthy has put some resources in the chat if anyone wants to look there about PILRAP, and that the Equal Justice Works organization has as well for student debt resources. And then we also have a question from student Emma Matters asking, is it true that 96% of loan forgiveness in the public sector gets denied because of clerical errors? So if anyone could speak to that.
I can just hop in there real quick. Sorry, this is Angie, and I'm happy to talk to anyone offline about it. It's so complicated that I don't want to derail our panel about it. But long story short is the program started in 2007. So 2017, because it's a 10-year program, was really the year that everyone kind of started applying. And the Department of Ed ended up denying a ton of them. I don't know if 96%, you know, or was, I don't know about that exact figure, but a heck of a lot of them, right? Enough to make the news and enough to start a whole bunch of lawsuits. Some of it was because, you know, you fill out this paperwork on your employer and nobody really checks it for years, and it's your lenders that you file it with rather than the Department of Ed, and it's like this whole complicated thing. So those lawsuits are being litigated now and they're pending. But I also know people who have gotten loan forgiveness. And so the people who were denied had kind of complicated things, and it's certainly not a perfect process. All I want to say is we'll keep following it, and I can point you to some resources if you want to talk about it more offline, because it could be like a whole session in itself. But Equal Justice Works has a campaign to save public interest loan forgiveness, which I think is a more important place to put our attention right now while you're still a law student thinking about these things, to preserve it so it's there for you when you graduate, because the Republicans definitely want to cut the public interest loan forgiveness or cap the amount much lower than most law students. But it's not just for law students, it's for firefighters and nurses and teachers. You know, there's a lot of people in this program. It's not designed just for lawyers. So Equal Justice Works, again, is a great place to check it out. Okay, thanks. I just wanted to say that.
Thanks so much, Angie. And just for all of our students out there, for anyone who's grappling with what it means to to work in the public interest or has questions about it, I highly, highly recommend making an appointment with Angie McCarthy. She's such an amazing resource and so knowledgeable, as is she's obviously already made clear during the course of this call. So shoot her an email and definitely make an appointment with her if you're interested in discussing more. At this point, we have about 13 minutes left. So I did want to open it up to student questions using the hand raise feature in the participants bar. So if anyone just wants to ask and turn on their video or not turn on their video, whatever you feel most comfortable with.
I love your cat, Caroline. That's all.
Thank you. That is my cat Cricket, and she is a Bengal, and she has a lot to say. I guess while students are preparing, the only other thing I would add about the litigation related question is that I think in law school you can find other skills-based classes. So there are drafting classes, there are mediation negotiation classes. I think all of those help make you or better prepare you for a public interest career. I also think it's helpful to have the litigation background, and the threat of a lawsuit can go a long way sometimes. And so knowing that you'll be able to litigate if necessary is helpful. And I also think that clear and concise writing can take you very far, no matter what kind of legal profession, where you end up in public interest, and knowing different styles of writing and knowing what tone to take in certain situations, all of that can be an asset when you enter into public interest.
I can ask a question, my own question. How important do you think it is to have throughout your law school career, specifically public interest related classes, whether they be like skills-based trial advocacy or like education law, poverty law, classes like that, but versus taking classes that maybe are not traditionally public interest, but that public interest issues often tend to intersect with. So obviously a lot of public interest issues tend to happen in housing law. So taking real estate classes or maybe secured transactions classes that aren't traditionally public interest, but that may have intersects in the field.
I think it's important to have a blend of classes. So some classes that perhaps are public interest, so that you can, because they will likely dive into kind of the structural underpinnings of systemic injustices. They might get into critical race, gender, class theory, which I think is important to understand the systems and contexts in which we are all living in. I'm also going to put in a plug. I'm teaching poverty law next semester, so please come and join. I'm pretty excited about it. So with that, right, thinking about like the kind of typical public interest classes, you're also going to want to take classes that are more doctrinal and thinking about the law in general. So with that, I would say administrative law can be incredibly important for public interest. That's getting into so many fields, environmental law, public benefits, health law, immigration, right? That is going to cover a number of different areas, and especially if you want to work in DC or at legal aid or as a transactional lawyer, you're going to want to know admin law, evidence, really important. I would toss in some practical classes as well, but really thinking about what are you interested in and what are you just going to need a grounding in to move forward in your career. So I wouldn't go straight one way or straight another way.
If I could just jump in for 1 second, just because we're talking about classes. I know the spring schedule just came out, and I'm happy to talk to students about, classes as well as jobs. But I wanted to flag because it's not on the schedule, but it's going to be. For the first time, we'll be offering a 1-credit movement lawyering class at WCL this spring. And it's not on the schedule yet because we had planned to do it originally as an intensive weekend. But then when we realized we'd be online, that sounded really awful to do like 9 hours a day on Zoom for a weekend. So we're working out the scheduling, but it should be up soon in the next couple of weeks. But if you have questions about the movement lawyering class, please ask me, but we're really excited about it. And for those of you who are interested in kind of community lawyering, I hope you check it out.
And we have a question asking if it'll be available to 1Ls in their second semester.
I'm sorry, and you guys can only take the 1L electives right now, but I hope to keep offering it. So sorry, but hang on.
And so we only have a few minutes left. And so I was wondering if each of you could give a plug for your clinic and just sort of tell all of us what sort of cases you work on in your clinic and what sort of experiences students who are thinking of applying to your clinic can anticipate having, especially now that it looks like next semester and who knows what fall semester next year will look like in this virtual learning platform.
So I am in the, so thank you to Angie and to Anjali and to my colleagues and to everyone who's come here. I work in the Entrepreneurship Law Clinic, which is a brand new clinic, and we work with nonprofits, social enterprises, cooperatives, and other enterprises on a range of different basically helping them to either set up their enterprise or to deal with a range of different things that come up in the context of the business or the enterprise. So there's contracts work. There's we're advising an organization that's trying to think through ways of conducting civil disobedience with the IRS. To working with social enterprises that are really thinking about the interplay of corporate law and nonprofit law. We really focus on companies and businesses that have a triple bottom line, that are trying to do something that is socially responsible and or more than that. And we're also looking at enterprises that are run by people of color and other marginalized communities, and how to support them as well. Finding pro bono assistance in this area is actually sometimes difficult. We touch on some IP, intellectual property work. We, sometimes there's a range of other things that come up. And I wanted to close with one quick thing. This whole question of like the law and what is it that we want to engage with. And I would just say, for me, I'm deeply skeptical of the law actually as a tool for movement. And also I recognize that me in community, that is one of the tools that I actually bring. And so really honing some specific skills. I hated contracts, I hated property. I really did actually, and I loved my poverty law class or my, the other classes, the critical race theory classes I took. I loved them and they fed my soul. And when I'm in community, people look to me as a lawyer and they want me to help them with something. And so what are the skills I actually bring? And Rohinton Mistry in A Fine Balance said, law is a grim, unsmiling thing, but not justice though. Justice is witty and whimsical, kind and caring. So just think about what justice means to you and how do you, put that into the world. That's it. Thank you.
That is tough to follow, but I will say, so I'm in the Disability Rights Law Clinic, and we take students represent clients in areas that intersect with disability rights. So every student, students work in partners, and every student team has at least one case where they're representing a client with respect to their child's educational needs. And so in this virtual environment, students are attending school meetings virtually, which is really, really interesting and new. And they're learning about different online platforms, and And then we also, like I mentioned, we are taking some compassionate release cases to represent clients who are seeking release from prison as a result of the threat of the spread of COVID-19. And then we also have some clients who are, we also represent clients with respect to various benefits. And so we actually have a student team that is preparing for a hearing right now, which will be over the telephone. And I'm happy to talk more about the clinic or anything else that was discussed after this presentation. And thanks to everyone.
And the Civil Advocacy Clinic is a one semester clinic with an economic justice focus. And so what we have typically been doing in the last couple of years is cases related to workers' rights. And so what that means is we're taking wage claim cases, so individuals who weren't paid overtime, individuals who weren't paid minimum wage, so individuals who have been economically wronged by their employers, and we're taking those cases, either attempting to settle them, or we're bringing cases in either small claims or DC Superior Court. And so we're litigating both, cases that might seem little, but aren't little to our clients, for $500, $1,000, $2,000, but can bring a great deal of meaning to somebody and economic security, somebody who is economically insecure, to cases in DC Superior Court where wages plus treble damages are getting up into the tens of thousands of dollars. These things add up pretty quickly, especially when somebody isn't paid overtime for a number of years. So we're engaging in litigation. We are looking at the statute of limitations. We're engaging in civil procedure. We're drawing on all of those trial skills and also those research and writing skills so that we can really establish what is the underpinning of the case. How can we make the law work for our client? How do we achieve a justice for individuals? What is justice for our client? And so really working with our client and thinking through, maybe justice isn't just money, maybe justice is something else. So what is justice? How do we engage in it in the system? That said, this semester and next semester, justice is a little bit different. And accessing justice is extremely difficult, especially for individuals whose cases are in small claims court in DC. Courts are backed up, cases are slow, and so we're really digging deep and working with our clients and thinking about alternative mechanisms towards achieving their goals. Or, what can we do to preserve our clients' claims while we wait for a year plus for their hearings? So we're not just sitting back and hanging out passively for our clients while this happens. What we're also doing is developing new claims, bringing on new clients, and also engaging in the unemployment insurance space. As you might have heard, unemployment insurance has been both a major economic security line for individuals, right? Like it's how we're achieving any semblance of economic security for those individuals who qualify for unemployment insurance. And it is also a hot mess right now because of the volume, because of structural inefficiencies, money not being put into the system when it needs to be. And I would also argue like poor regulation drafting, which is where that admin law comes in. So we're engaging in a really interesting space right now at the Civil Advocacy Clinic. And we've already had a virtual hearing in DC Superior Court. We will likely have some more. I just wanted to note that we are will occasionally engage in public benefits cases, which are close to my heart, housing cases, and a whole range, just depending on what our clients need and what space we're in. Oh, and I wanted to just note really quickly that for everybody sitting here, you guys are going to find your path, and it might take a few different turns. I never expected that after law school, I wouldn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And I would find myself literally on a mountaintop in New Hampshire, working for the Appalachian Mountain Club and driving trucks around delivering food to different huts, right? Living in a dorm. But it was what I needed at that time to give myself the space to think about what I need to do next. And it took care of my needs. I had a roof over my head, I had food, I had companionship, and for me, a need is being outside, and I learned to recognize that need and value it. So anyway, even if you're not sure of your path, or even if your path takes some unexpected turns, you're going to end up where you need to be, and in a place that suits you, as long as you're paying attention to yourself and being attentive. So thank you everybody for attending. It's been wonderful.
Hi, everyone. So I'll make it quick, but thank you so much to Angie and Anjali for putting this on, and of course to my co-workers, Caroline, Parag, and Jessica. Really, I feel really lucky to work with them and to share our ideas together. I guess I'll just say, a plug for the Immigrant Justice Clinic. It is a tough time for all of us, and yes, immigration is a hot topic, but we cut across so many different disciplines and issues. Our cases range from, helping people regain their wages, people who are not paid because of their immigration status. We get into asylum cases, and we get to learn about race issues, LGBT issues. In my practice particularly, right, we also come across criminal immigration issues. And so, that goes into just the structural and systemic injustices that arise from our own criminal legal system, and that kind of form this pipeline into immigration and deportation and detention. So, I mean, our cases right now are very active. My co-professor Jayesh Rathod is in court this minute with 2 of our students, supporting a refugee to achieve lawful status. In 2 weeks, I'm going back to the immigration court for an asylum claim. And then 2 weeks after that, I'll also be back in court with another set of students, trying to help another client to maintain his green card. So the action is there, and we are always needed. If you were to join our clinic, we promise you will get all the skills, a range of skills, and a range of just knowledge building and network building. Again, it's so important, and it will be with you forever. So thank you very much.
Well, I just wanted to thank everyone again for joining us today. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to the Equal Justice Foundation and Anjali for moderating. I just want to put one final plug, which is that, everyone talks about networking like it's like this big scary thing, but it's really building community. And the first thing you should do is start right here at WCL. Both the faculty who share your passion for social justice, like the ones on this panel, but there are so many more, and your fellow students, especially in these times, I think we can all feel a bit of a cosmic weight for the 1Ls when you come to law school because you want to advocate for change and you're in contracts or property and feeling a little, low or wondering like why you made this choice. The best way to get through those moments is friendships with people who care about the things that you care about, even if it's not the exact same issue. People who share your passion and commitment to empowering others. So with that plug, join the Equal Justice Foundation. I know they're doing a mentorship program this year. Meet your friends, meet your people, because I promise you that they will sustain you, because this work is hard, right? So find your people. And with that, I will sign off, but I want to thank you all for being here, and please use me and the Office of Public Interest as a resource anytime. You don't even have to have a reason to talk to me. And I have a cat too, so thanks.
Thanks so much to everyone. Thank you to all of our panelists and all of our attendees. Have a good rest of your
Thank you so much.
Have a good rest of your week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Much.